What's up guys, it's Patrick here. Welcome to another Skillshare premium class. We're gonna be making a really highly requested class today, photorealistic candy, and specifically ring pops. This one's a very fun one and very simple, and we're only gonna be using Cinema 4D and a little bit of Octane as well. And then we're gonna put it into a great still life, which will be good for ads and social media, all that stuff. So we're gonna go over the whole ideation process, references. We're gonna go through the modeling, camera settings, lighting, rendering, Photoshop, composition, and then making some cool still life out of it as well. It's been a while, but I think this class is for sure gonna be useful for a lot of people, and I can't wait to jump in with you guys, so let's do it. What's up guys, so now we are in the preliminary phase where typically I would be picking a reference photo or something of that nature, and usually I just go to Google Images because if you're trying to make things that are super realistic looking, you're gonna want at least some decent proportions and just seeing close-ups of the texture, see how that all works. So we're gonna go here and pick some of this stuff. I like this one, it gives you a lot of variety, and to kind of mark these down and place them in an area we can see, I usually have this tiny program called PureRef. And it's free, I believe. At least when I got it, it was free. And it's super dope. You can just drag images to it. You can kind of scale them however you want. It always stays on the top layer. So very nice tool. So let's see, let's grab a couple more. Maybe this one is cool. Just drag them. And they all come in different sizes depending on how big they actually are. But super helpful. You can kind of arrange them how you want. You can even, if you have like a bunch of pictures and you're just dragging stuff around. If you highlight them all, you can right-click Images, Arrange, and Optimal, and it gives you a really cool collage. Super dope, super useful. I may have mentioned it in other programs, I'm not sure, or other classes of mine, I'm not sure. But yeah, so I'm going to delete these two. I don't think I need them. I'm just going to keep maybe these two, because you can get a couple different angles like this, and they're kind of all on white. Easy to see, and I'm going to minimize that. And the next step will just be starting these things. So we have our references here. We can place them anywhere. We can even place them in a different monitor if we have. I may keep them here for now and then just work off that and move this panel as I would need to. But in any case, I think it's a good time to start modeling. This is the old standard workspace, or layout, I should say. I use a completely different one for a lot of my dailies just to speed up the process, but I guess for this I'll just be using the old layout. Since R25 or 26, I can't remember, they've switched up the layout to a newer one, which I am less familiar of, and so we're just going to be using this. So without further ado, I think we can start creating some cool shapes here, and I believe if you look at the amount of sides on these things, let's start with a very simple shape. Let's go... how many sides is that? I think it's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 8 sides to these things, and pretty much the whole thing has 8 sides. It just changes in the scale of them. So I think what we're going to start with is, let's go start with a cylinder. I think I want to start with a cylinder. And there we go. We just want to make sure that in the, see, I'm already moving this thing. Maybe you can make it a bit smaller just to see. And have this one up. But we start with a cylinder here, and if we go to the attributes panel here, we see the amount of sides or the rotation segments are 16. Let's change that to 8. And that should be good. And I think we're going to want one split here. So let's go here and rotation segments 8. That's good. Let's take the height down to 1, I believe. And then if you go to display, shading lines, or quick shading lines might help. You can see the segments there pretty nicely. And we may need 2 segments actually. There we go. So this doesn't look like a ring pop yet, but it will in a second. So what we need to do now is, I believe, just click C, or this guy here, make it editable. So now we can take these polygons by going to like the face, edges, or point mode, and start manipulating these things just like this. And so that's the key here. We're not going to want to move them with the faces. We're going to want to move them with the lines. And if you're in any of these modes, like the move mode, you can just double click one of these guys and it'll select the whole circumference, I believe that's the word. And if you click T, you can just scale these things up like this and make them smaller depending on which side you're at. So you can see pretty quickly here, if we go to the front view here, it'll be easy to see. All we're trying to do is make this shape. So very simple. Let's leave, actually let's make this one a little bit smaller. Let's bring this guy up a little bit. And I'm using key commands. Usually I'm just clicking E, T, or R. For E being move, R rotate, and T scale. So that's all you pretty much need to know. And then double clicking here, let's go ahead and E. And you'll see we're moving these edges, but not the bottom. Might just want to go here and select the faces instead, just for this one because it's at the very bottom. So we can go U, L, and it'll be selecting the loop mode. So let's just select this whole bottom part here. E again for the move tool, and then go back to this mode. Bring this up. And somewhere around that, you can always bring like reference images in the back, which can help. But I think for this, it doesn't really matter as long as we're getting the general shape. Maybe this one. Let's move this line a little bit smaller. And I think that's honestly good for the shape. So we're looking good there. And that's honestly as crazy as it gets for the modeling of that piece. And yeah, we can go ahead and I believe create another cylinder. This will be for this base part here. And before we do that, I'm just going to hide the cylinder. Let's call this the diamond. Let's call this the easiest way to pop, I guess. It's at the top. And the cylinder will be base. Bring that underneath. Make it active again. And let's just start making this a little bit more finite and small. So let's go bring it down. Again, we don't have to be too crazy. We're making it approximate. Something like this. You see it's pretty thin. So yeah, we're gonna get decently thin with it. Like that. And then if you notice, I don't know if you can really see in any of these, but there's a clear like thing that sticks out here that we want to be attentive to. So what I'm going to do is essentially, let's take out some of these segments here, just like that. And then we're going to click C so we can edit this thing. And if you'll notice, it looks pretty low poly now, but right now we're going to take the pop and go to X-ray mode so we can see in between it. We're going to want to extrude a piece out here. So easiest way to do that, let's go to the face mode. And then remember U, L to loop select this whole area. Let's go ahead and inset, which will give you another segment just going inside of it. And we want to pretty much match that shape in there. So let's go over there. And then holding down Control or Command, I believe, if you're on a Mac, just bring it up, which will extrude one of these faces out. And I think that's about how much you want to do it. Nothing too crazy. And you'll see there's, if you can see, I don't know, depending on the reference photos you're using, you might be able to see the ridges in here like this. And that doesn't have to be too exact because it's literally being covered by so much candy. We're just going to create those ridges here. But something to keep in mind is that we want to smooth these things out. And to smooth those out, we're going to put those into a subdivision surface, which is this guy here. So just create one of those guys. Let's move it underneath the pop. And then create the base, take that and make it a child of the subdivision surface. And that's going to make this thing really smooth. However, it doesn't exactly have any hard edges because we need to add a bunch of loops to it. Edge loops. So let's press Q and just disable the subdivision surface. That's a easy trick right there. Just clicking Q will allow you to do that. And let's make some loop cuts here. We need to make it sharp around the edges. So I'm going to go to Command A. I usually do just select everything. Go to Loop, Path Cut. And then here I'm just going to click and drag until I have an area here. And you'll see right away, if I were to just add one here, press Q, you can see we're getting a little bit more detail towards the edge here, but it's not really going to be showing until we add enough. So let's add one to the bottom now. Now if we click Q, we're actually getting some stiffness there. And we're probably going to want even more stiffness because it's a pretty sharp edge. And to add a little bit more stiffness there, let's just add a quick loop cut here. And a loop cut here. Again, this doesn't have to be too exact. You could go as to be as exact as you want to, make sure it's right in the middle. Create two of them. And then while you have maybe one of these faces selected, you can just do something like this. So there's many ways to make it exact, but for something this small, it doesn't really matter. And then when you click Q, you got these nice clean shapes here. Of course, this needs to be cleaned up. So we're going to do the same to that kind of base area here. So what I'm going to do is select all of them, Command A, and let's go loop path cut. And I'm going to go somewhere to make it like a clean edge. So it's the farther away you put it towards the edge, the more kind of flow it's going to have. So if I put it here, you'll see pretty sharp edge there versus here, a much more gradual edge. So that is pretty much the what you got to do there. Oops. Yep, looks good. So I'm going to go here and make it pretty sharp here. And now we got a sharp edge. And I'm going to do the same with this guy. So you can kind of do this mode if you want with subdivision surface activated so you can see what you're doing in real time. And I think that might be the easiest. Sometimes I just like to make it very simple. So now that we have this edge and this edge, let's create one in the middle, make it centered, and create more of these guys. And maybe like that. So now that we have approximate amount of segments here, we're going to, with the faces selected, it's UL, and select a bunch of these guys like this. And then we can go bevel. And we can bevel these guys out a little bit. And if you want, inset it so they'll be a little bit sharper. So now when you subdivision surface it, you can solo this guy. Oops. Let's solo. There you go. You can kind of see what we're working with here. So pretty simple, but it gets the job done. And I believe the biggest, is it the biggest portion is at the top? It's hard to tell. I guess what we made could be good. Looks like the top one's a little bit bigger. So what we can do is, here, let's take this one. Actually, let's take this edge loop right here, move it down, loop select this face. Actually, sorry, let's loop select this edge, bring it up a little bit. Sorry, because this these points are the way they are, let's select the faces. Bring that up a little bit. And then loop select this guy and bevel it out a little bit further. And if you want this area to be sharper, let's select and inset. And now this should be a decent model for this thing. So now we go. A little bit bigger on the top, still gets the job done. Let's unsolo that part. So we're looking pretty good. Looks like a ring pop so far. Maybe a little bit high. So if we want, we can take the pop part and maybe bring it up a little bit. And then just move the whole thing down, going into model mode. Bring it down. And an easy way to snap these things, if you go to this guy, enable axis, and click enable snap, you can snap it to the very bottom, disable axis, and snap it to the top there. So now we're kind of perfectly on the that part of the mesh, and then just disable that. So now we got a perfect, everything's good. We just need to make the kind of ring part. And I was trying to figure out the best way to do this. And I think the best way, if I remember correctly, was just to make, let's go, I believe it's tube, and we're gonna make it going on the z-axis like this. You can see, kind of see where I'm going with here. And let's move it all the way down. Actually, let's T scale it down to we have the approximate size. This part you can do by yourself. That's like, just imagine this was a cut ring shape instead of just a full ring. So let's make it pretty. There you go, just like that. And we kind of get the idea here. And then just seeing how much we want to kill the height on this. If you look at the thickness here, let's just make it a little bit thinner. Something like that. Cool. So minus it being cut at the bottom, we're looking good. Now we could boolean it, we could do all that stuff, but I think the more simple option that I came up with was putting it into a subdivision surface and just slicing it. So let's go slice, just like that. So we don't want that, we kind of want the reverse of this. So let's start with 180 to 0. Oh, wait, maybe not. Let's go 360, 180. Something like that. So that gives us half. And then I was just playing around with, here we need more of this. Maybe we want this at like 100. And this to be, oh, not 100. Let's go maybe 120. And this can be 420. That looks right. Yeah. So 420 and 120. That looks good. If you were to put this into a subdivision surface, I kind of like to use one subdivision surface for both objects, but you can't plug two things at a time into a subdivision surface. But you can if you select both of them and Alt-G, put them in a null. So then anything that's in the null is kind of applied. So we look at this, and it looks pretty decent. That's kind of getting us where we need. And then messing with the segments here. So you can see, depending on the cap settings, we can make it really sharp or not sharp at all. The rotation segments, we can dim down. You can see what happens. So I feel like these aren't perfectly circles, so something like that's good. And then height segments, depending on how sharp we want the ring. I think something like that might be nice. Maybe 18. So to me that looks good, and then we can always go back to kind of like the scale of these things and the inner side, how tall they are. But I think I want to keep it here. And this is pretty much our finished ring pop. We can, if you want, take one of these guys down, but I think I like it like that. We're going to be using instances, so by no means is this a very heavy or dense polygonal shape by any means, but that is pretty much the modeling of the candy there. You can do some stuff if you really want to rough it up. You can kind of make these guys, the pop, a little bit more dynamic if you want, but we're going to be doing a lot of that in the texturing, so we can really hunker down with such a very simple base model here. And then going forward, we can kind of add a bunch of imperfections and all that stuff to make it realistic. So right now it kind of looks pretty simple, but this is going to get very, very complex soon. Not really as far as skill level, but as far as the look of it. And just looking at it now, I might want to increase the size of this guy real quick. So what we can do is, let's go T for the scale and kind of increase. I believe we want to lock the height and just increase the depth and the X, if that makes sense. So that looks good. Unlock the Y, and we should be good. I think we're ready to light and texture this thing. So we'll do that in the next section. All right, guys, so we're back here and we have this finished model here. And I think we're ready to kind of get this scene set up. So we're going to set up a camera real quick. And to do that, I'm just going to do Shift-C. And I'm just gonna type in Octane and then just go Octane camera. Should be good. And then hop inside of that camera by going to clicking this little square here. And I'm going to kind of cancel all these coordinates out here, the coordinates, and just move the Z back so we can see kind of what's going on here. I like to have a pretty impactful camera, longer lens. So I'm gonna go scale more back on the Z and go to the object tab. Instead of classic, let's go to like telephoto. And that may kind of seem like nothing really happened, but you'll be able to see once we start rendering. And I'm also going to look into the render settings here. I have it set to Octane render. May start making classes soon on like Redshift. I need to get more into that. I know Cinema 4D comes with it, but I've just been Octane for so long, and so I appreciate you guys rolling with me here. I'm going to go to output. We really just have to worry about the width and height. So I think I'm actually going to keep that at 1500 by 1500. Lock that there. Depending on if you want to go like 1920 by 1080 or 1500 by 1500, up to you guys. I'm going to keep it square for the time being. And that's really all we have to worry about here. As long as it's set to Octane, we're good. And I want to be able to see the borders here now. So if I just click into the viewport and go Shift V, go to Safe Frames, take the opacity to 100. Now we can see kind of our aspect ratio. And if you really want some details, go Octane camera, composition, grid. So now we can see, oh, this isn't really centered. So what we're gonna do is let's tilt the camera up a little bit. Or in fact, let's move the ring pop down. So let's collapse these into a group. So we have the tube here. Let's call that ring and base. Collapse that. And then put these all into a null together. Alt G. Name this ring pop. And that should be good. And depending on what your use case is, maybe you'd want to bring the axis down. Remember, we have to click enable axis here. Depending on if you're going to have these stand up on the ground, you might want to have them there. But I kind of want these guys to be dead center. So I'm going to switch camera view, make sure this guy looks like he's centered here. And just somewhere kind of in the middle, because once we clone these, it'll be better to have it like that. So that looks good there. And then once we disable the axis, we can go back to the coordinates, move it down, and it should look pretty centered, which it does. And then when we want to rotate it and stuff, it's easy to just boom, like this. And that should be good. And notice how the ring and the base here aren't really attached. We could be doing like some volume modding, all that stuff, but we don't need to mess with that many segments. We'll be doing this in the texturing. There's a way you can kind of blend those a little bit together. So let's kind of center this out again. Actually, we can, here, let's 0, 0, 0, and maybe move it on like a cool axis like this, just while we get everything set up. So we have the ring pop and the camera. It doesn't really matter the order these are in, but we have the ring pop and the camera. Let's go ahead and start rendering this stuff. So let's go and grab an Octane live viewer window. So let's go Octane live viewer window, and pretty big. So let's bring this down here, and grabbing these three little bars, let's post these next door here so we can see what's going on, as well as maybe grabbing Octane settings here. And this part I think is pretty important, just getting some basic settings so we can have something we like. So if you want to just copy these settings, I only really messed with maybe the max samples. Bring this to 50 or 100 depending on your computer's needs, but that 100 is not too bad. Maybe I'll go to like 60 to get a very quick, clean render, and make sure you're on path tracing instead of direct lighting. And then camera imager, keep everything the way it is. That should be good. So let's render right here. And this is what we're getting. And typically I'll click this lock icon here because it'll allow us to like move these frames and get us our actual aspect ratio here and not just fit it to this box. So I think what I'm going to do is subtract this a little bit, and that should be good. So very fast render. If I were to render this, oops, redo the render, extremely fast. Again, I'm working with a couple 3090s, so there is that. And then some quick camera settings before we get started here to make this thing really look better in the long run. Let's click this camera tag here, camera imager, enable camera imager, highlight compression, take that all the way up, and to you right now, it may look like I just made it really flat, and that's what we want because then we'll have more latitude, dynamic range to work with, more of a camera guy thing. But and then we can take the exposure up to compensate a little bit, maybe to like 1.7. I do this for every one of my renders, just to give it a little bit of a punch with more detail. And I think we can probably move base a little bit down, so it's not outside of it, it's kind of colliding with it. And that looks good. So I believe we can start lighting this thing. So first thing I want to do is create, if you go to Objects, HDR Environment. Now this is kind of what we want here. It's pretty much a empty sky. We want to bring in an HDR in there, and I'm probably, for the HDRIs, I'm going to grab, see if I can bring that in here. HDRIs. Gotcha. So this is, you can bring this in here. These are just some HDRIs from my, from one of my packs, and one of these I do use a lot. You can actually get these on my patrick4d.store website. And I use parking deck 1, so I'll grab the HDRI and or HDR file and just put it in there. And I can click no for now. And you can see already we're getting a pretty nice lighting. I can rotate this guy however I want it, but I don't really want to be able to see the background. So I'm going to create another HDR environment, and it's kind of overriding this other one here. So I'm going to rename this BG for background. And just go from primary environment to visible. So now, if we go back to this one, we just rotate. That's all we really need. So that, even that's looking pretty good. And I usually bump the power up a bit. Something like that. Something that'll give us a nice immediate lighting. And so far, we're still looking at just blank geometry here. But at least it's in a lighting scenario that we can start off with and see what textures start to look like. I might boost this to like 10, something like that. And that's good. So we're at a good spot here. Let's say we're done for lighting until we want to add like another area light. Usually I'll kind of set a baseline image lighting there. And then if I think it needs some kind of punch or a kick from a different direction, I'll add that. So we're good there. The next thing we want to do is start messing with textures. This is where it gets pretty fun. So I'm going to go Shift C and Octane Node Editor. And this is going to give us exactly what we need here. And sometimes I kind of replace what's going on here, and sometimes I leave it there. I'm going to kind of select one of these ring pops here. Maybe I'll do the, I don't know which one I like more. Maybe the green one we'll try to replicate first. So I want that pretty small in the frame, keep it maybe there. And then I could replace maybe the live viewer window. So now we can switch between the view and the Octane node editor. Sometimes when you do it this way, it won't update correctly, but we'll see how this works. Let's go ahead and create a composite material, just like that. I usually start every material with a composite material. And I guess you guys can't see it, but it's below my picture here. But either way, let's grab the composite material and put it on the base and ring. So we have that there. Hopefully you guys kind of understood what just happened there. Underneath my face, where you can see me, there is the material. So as long as you know that, we should be good. So we have the material here, which is applied to the base and the ring. The first thing I want to do is grab material 1 and create a submaterial, which should make it glossy. Now we're getting some nice highlights. Perfect. And the next thing we want to do is, I think we don't need to smooth out any edges, not with this ring. So we're good there. Maybe zoom in here a little bit. And then we'll want to create some color here. So I guess the reference here is blue, and it almost looks like it's translucent a little bit. Not sure if I want to do that or if I want to just keep it like plasticky, because some of them are plastic. But if you do want to, let's go ahead and create a specular. Nice. And then let's go ahead and go common, fake shadows. And that'll let light kind of pass through these things a little bit more realistically. And then we can go to the medium and scatter. So now it's going to kind of get darker a little bit in certain places where the light is hitting. So we'll drag something into the absorption, maybe a color RGB spectrum. And we can bring this to HSV. We can just select the colors here. And let's go get this like blue color here. If we just select something like that. And increase the brightness here. And then the important part, scattering. Float. And now the, I don't know if you can kind of see what's going on here, but we're kind of letting the light be very roughed up as it hits inside of this thing. And then we can adjust the density here. And see what happens if we don't have a lot of density versus a lot more. Something like that looks good. We're going to definitely want to tone down that blue color though, because that's very, something like that. Looks more purple than anything. Increase the color. Boom. And if anything, this looks a little bit more matte, so we're not getting like complete shines. So let's go ahead and rough it up a little bit. Maybe not that much. A little bit more. Something like that, I believe. Looks good. And we also have to start rotating this and seeing what's really going on with this light and how it's interacting with stuff. Okay. So to me, this needs to be a little bit darker. So let's go back into the node editor and honestly, I think go to the transmission tab and add a color node. Bring that down just a little bit. We add some color in there. Just like that. Cool. That looks pretty good from now. We can keep that there how it is. Now it's time for the fun part, the specular material that will be on this main ring pop thing. So we are going to create another material. So material, create Octane composite material again, and drag that onto the pop. Go back to the node editor with the pop selected. Material, submaterial. Gotcha, and you can see kind of what's going on here. We have a glossy material kind of affecting this thing. And I don't think we need this song tag. Is that gonna do anything? Yeah, so that was kind of distorting our mesh a little bit. We don't need that. But for this, you'll be able to see what's going on here. So before I kind of even get to the specular part, what we're going to do is go to basic and click round edges. Now we're going to have this other tab here. Drag that out. Let's go round edges, main, fast to accurate. And now watch what happens when we increase this radius. We're going to take these unrealistic sharp edges. See in this reference we have a little bit of a bevel there, and we could bevel the actual geometry, but it's nicer to be able to do that on the actual ring pop. So let's click consider others and bring this guy out. So you can see we're actually getting a much more beveled thing right there, and that's kind of what we're looking for. Just like that, and that'll look much nicer, more realistic when we start adding stuff there. So we got that there. Let's start with the specular material. So let's go submaterial. We can go glossy to specular. Now you can see kind of what's going on. Perfect. We can see the stuff hitting the areas on the inside. Let's go ahead and common, fake shadows, check. Nice. And same thing. So we're going to go to the medium tab, scattering, absorption, RGB color, scattering, add a float. And the float we're going to want to take down almost all the way. We want a little bit of roughed upness going on in there. Very slight. It's like 0.006579, I guess. And then create a greenish texture here, more like a yellow. And then I think the scattering we can tone down a bit. Maybe increase that guy. Looking good. And this is where we're going to add some bump here. So I believe, and I can't remember if we want to do the normal or the roughness or what have you, but we are going to create a flakes tab, flakes, and apply this to, I think, the bump, or I think normal first maybe. Let's try that. And take the base color down to black. And now we're kind of replacing, see what it's doing here is it going to show us the solo? It won't probably show us. That glitches on that. Oh, that's kind of what it's doing. It's projecting a bunch of randomized flakes on there. Flake size, flake variance, let's increase the variance. And then we're going to go ahead and take the blend factor, I believe, all the way down. And add a transform node. And bring this guy down until this looks kind of like bubbles and stuff. And it doesn't look fully realistic now, but you can take something like a color correction node and place that in between and kind of lower the kind of what's going on there. So from afar, it actually kind of looks like a little bit more roughed up and stuff, like that. And we can take the size variance, bump that up a little bit more. Let me see if we bump up the flake size, what that does. Yeah, something like that, I believe, isn't too bad. Take the brightness down. Yeah, so that's looking much more roughed up, much more realistic. And we can actually add it with some other elements. So if we go to a add an Octane noise. And let's just like, let's take out the normal there, like these spots real quick, and just work with the noise. So if we solo the noise, we can see kind of what we're working with here. We want something a little bit bigger. Let's see, turbulence might work a little bit better, yeah. And create a transform node. And matter of fact, actually a projection node as well. Let's go box. And just increase this size. Something like this. And we don't want this too harsh at all. So if anything, that's not what we want. So maybe something like that, really tone down, disable the node. Let's see how this looks. Gotcha. So we are getting some cool, it's hard to see maybe on your screen, so we can maybe bump up the power a little bit. Yeah, it looks good. Perfect. Maybe even a little bit more. Okay. And then we just drag this into the bump again. And we can kind of mix both of those together. So I think those two mix looks great. We got the round edges, we got everything working together. Kind of hard to see what's going on. So we have in the normal, the flakes, and in the bump, the noise. And I think combined that makes for a really realistic looking ring pop. And I think the only thing we need to left is kind of increase the saturation of the green here. Mess with the color, and this is where it gets really easy to change the color to whatever you're kind of vibing with. Kind of have more of a yellowish color here, which I believe is fine. And now when you rotate this thing, save again. You rotate this whole thing, we kind of have this really nice kind of ring pop going here. And to me, I think that fits the bill for the most part to what we want. And yeah, I think I might want to change this. I might want to make this base material a little bit more plasticky and less translucent because I'm just not a fan of that at the moment. So I'm going to go back to this composite material. I'm going to just take this from specular to glossy. And kind of detach these guys here. Take the color to the diffuse maybe. Shader. Yeah, something like that. And you can even add if we want to copy the flakes texture from this node or this material to this material, and maybe bring that onto the roughness. We're going to get some really nice kind of like material here. And I believe we can just then take the blend factor and bring that up until we don't really need it anymore. And actually, let's create a mix node here. And instead of this being in the amount, let's bring that to a texture here. So this will be full flakes. This will be full roughness, I guess. We're going to want to find somewhere in between. Kind of like, maybe like that. And then just take this color a little bit fuller. And to me, that looks pretty good. It looks like a ring pop. So that's how you make one ring pop. And now I'm going to show you pretty much how you create a clone of these. And then we're going to make another texture that'll randomize pretty much everything. So yeah, let's do that now. So with this guy, we have the ring pop here. We have this guy. Let's copy and paste this and just hide that one right there. For this one, we're going to pretty much start from scratch on the materials. We can keep the materials how they are now, but let's go and hop this into a cloner, which is this guy right here. And let's bring these guys above the background and HDRIs. Let's go ahead and take the ring pop and drag it on top of the cloner. Make the cloner a render instance. Everything's going to load much faster if we keep it that way. And kind of what I like to do is scale these guys down. And let's go cloner, grid, object. So they're all going to disappear. We need to clone them on an object. And I like grabbing like a sphere, something like this, that you saw on maybe my Instagram when I posted about it. And you can see we have like faces here and stuff. So let's go from standard to icosahedron. Change these segments from like 16 to 12. And go cloner, drag the sphere on top here. Now by default, it's going to randomly assort them in places. And that is kind of cool if you want to just like hide the sphere and have them all be randomized there. That's also very cool. But let's go to the cloner, and from surface, let's go to vertex. And then hide the sphere. And then we can go to the transform, and I believe it's the rotation. Let's go -90. Just like that. And now we get a very cool looking assortment here. And when we rotate the sphere, everything rotates together. So that's kind of cool. And again, we're still just using the, what do you call it? What is the word I was thinking of? Oh, the HDRI to light this thing. So at this stage, you can kind of see, oh, how does this work with like different, HDRI rotation values and stuff like that. You can start messing with this, and sometimes you'll just hit something, you're like, ooh, that looks great. Let's keep it there. So I kind of like, let's go something like this. I like these ones on the edges for sure. Kind of happy with that. A little bit darker on that side. But everything's too uniform, so we want to kind of randomize these colors. And the way to do that, we don't have to do that and make like 5 different types of models and texture them differently. We can kind of do that with a randomizer, essentially, in Octane. So before we do that, let's randomize the sizes a little bit. Let's go Shift C, random. Make sure it's the random MoGraph, this purpley guy. And by default, they're going to kind of go everywhere. Let's go parameter, take the position, leave them there. And then take the scale, uniform scale, and start messing with this guy. That'll create some smaller ones, bigger ones. And if you want, you can rotate them kind of like this. If you want to just have that extra bit of realism there. And that should be good. Something that looks realistic, you know, not too crazy. If you have some that are running into each other, that's not that big of a deal. You can add a push apart, change the iterations to like 68 or something like that, and change this to scale apart, and take this down, and we'll see just increasing this value here. I'm going to start, yeah, something like that. That should be good. So hopefully you guys understood that. I wasn't rambling too much, and we're going to get into randomizing the color now. I think we have a great still life at this point. Now we just need to randomize stuff. So let's go and delete this material here. So we can keep the materials of the bases, but let's just work on the material. I'm going to duplicate the composite. Let's call this original texture we had. Let's call it pop 1, and then we'll duplicate it. Call this like random pop. And then we're going to drag this onto the cloner this time. So far it should look kind of how it was before. Let's go to the node editor. And this is called, what do we call this? Random pop. You can see it titled here. And this is where it's gonna get cool. So the color is being derived from the medium here, the shader. And we want to randomize that. So let's remember this color here. And before anything changes here, let's add a random color. And this is going to be our randomizer here. But we need to drag this into something like a gradient, Octane gradient. And that's going to be driving kind of all this stuff. So let's go ahead and honestly kill this color here. We should have some random color here. Okay. That's kind of the default there. And the gradient, this is where we're going to craft our colors that we want. So we can highlight both of these. Let's go interpolation of all knots, step. So now they're going to be, it's going to be a pretty harsh decline here. So one was going to be white and one was going to be, let's say, red. I believe. Just drag this gradient into the absorption. Gotcha. So now we got some red ones and some white ones and a nice random assortment of colors, and that's dope. So we can change maybe this red one. That might be too intense, or if you like that, that's totally fine. Let's go red. Maybe make these the greenish ones we had, just like that. And the white, let's maybe make these. What are the other colors? Yeah, purple's cool. Drag them a little bit like that. And then this flow texture, make them a little bit foggy around the inside. Kind of like that, looks good. So now we have two separate colors. And it gets, at least in my past experience, it gets a little dicey when you start adding a bunch of colors for some reason. They start blending together. Actually, I'm gonna command copy this one. So if we were to make this one maybe a green one or blue one, they start getting a little bit kind of fuzzy for whatever reason. Let's go here and go maybe red. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good. And if you don't like the way they're mapping together, you can take the random color and just change the seed. Just like that. And you see you got some that are kind of like this weird off-white color. Yeah. So that might be something you have to deal with a little bit. But for the most part, we're looking good. I was actually happy with the first seed, so we can keep it there. And yeah, I think that's for the most part how you do that. Again, if you change the density, it'll apply it for all of them. Cool. And these might need a little bit more saturation on some of these. Purple. Cool. That's looking actually pretty dope. It looks pretty realistic. You can change these colors as many times as you want. And that's good. The next thing we have to do is just change the stuff for the color of the base and ring. So let's just copy these two nodes here. Go to Octane Composite. Let's random base. And drag that onto the base ring. Now we are here, and where we have the color here, I'm just gonna delete that gradient into the diffuse, and pretty much immediately we should see, maybe not, base ring. Oh wait, let me see here. What's going on here? Maybe Okay, this is confusing. Let me see what's going on here. Where are these colors coming from? I think we have like a little bit of a glitch for some reason. Okay, there we go. Sorry, that was actually, there was no human error there. There's, when you have the Octane node selected, sometimes it takes a while to update. So let's go random base to the base and ring. Perfect, there we go. And then we can just change these to make them different colors if you want. Let's go ahead and this one, like kind of a teal. This one maybe like a orange, and this one maybe like a yellow. And these are looking good. Then we just have to kind of randomize the seed of the random color to our liking. Something like that looks dope. And that's pretty much how you do it, guys. That's if you want to add some finishing touches, you can go to the camera tab here, go to post-processing, enable bloom. You can kind of get some cool looking kind of dreamlike glows here, maybe a little bit of glare, and then cut it off a little bit so it's only affecting like the really bright areas. Yeah, you can see a little bit more there. But typically I want to keep that tone down a little bit. But for the most part, that's good, guys. And then we just have to go and mess with this on Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead, make sure all the settings are good. I usually take the samples after this to something a little bit higher, like 800. And we could have added an area light if we wanted to, or even randomized the rotation on some of the other axes here. If you wanted less of a, oh, we're cloning this on a ball here. But for the most part, we kind of got the job done. And now, again, you can just change the size of the ball to kind of randomize this thing even more, or just straight up rotate the ball to get more angles of this thing. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with this. So I think that's good. And I think we'll start and render this. We're getting a lot of yellow here. Maybe I'll change the random base a little bit, changing the seed up. See if we can go in here and increase the, there we go. A little bit less yellow. But that looks good. And I think that is good to render. Let me just mess with the lighting a little bit maybe. And this is just assuming you want to stick with a black background. If you wanted to change the background color, you just go to the background and add a color, something like that. And you can kind of choose whatever color your heart desires. So maybe something like that you want to go with. Make it a little bit darker, but I kind of like the bright pop of blue or something like that. That's pretty cool. And we can stick with something like that. So let's go ahead and render this out. If you wanted to have the blue shine in the background, I think you would want to go to visible environment and refractions. And so now that is technically what you would be seeing in the background. So anytime we change the background color, we're going to get realistic kind of bleed through these things. And this might give you a better idea of what color you want to go with. Something like that. Or you can just stick with black. Totally up to you. But to me, that looks pretty good. And I'm actually going to disable that because I want a little bit of the brighter reflections kind of hanging through, even if it's technically unrealistic. But that looks good. So let's save that and render it. Cool. Now this might not take as long for me to render. It's pretty much almost done at this point. I'm using technically 4 graphics cards to render this out. But by all means, take your time, let it finish, maybe even pause the class, and we'll get this thing going. So I'm going to right-click, save as a 16-bit TIFF, and I'll just save it wherever. Go share tutorials, premium, ring pop, boom. So that is saved for me. And real quick, I'm going to just open it up real quick in Photoshop. This is where we're going to be doing the second half of this. Or not second half, we're pretty much almost done. Let's go and grab the file here. Just like that. So now we got this thing open in Photoshop, 1500 by 1500, looking nice. And yeah, we can start editing this thing. So I usually Command J, just copy the background layer, make a convert for smart filter so we can always edit the camera raw filter. And we can just start adjusting these colors real quick. Okay, cool. So right off the bat, nothing's hitting the black. We do have some stuff peeking the highlights, which is probably these white areas right here. But I like increasing the exposure, maybe taking the whites up a little bit, something like this. This is like a candy render, so you want it to kind of pop a little bit. Maybe increase the vibrance a little bit. Mess with the shadows. Actually, maybe take the shadows up and the black value down a little bit. It's going to create some nice contrast here. And for stuff like this, I typically don't go too crazy with some of these other sliders because I think it's good as is. Maybe adding a little bit of the yellow should be good. I think for something like this, you just want it to look really playful, friendly, even childlike. So, you know, the more saturated the color, sometimes that even looks cooler. And you can see the before and after here. Kind of a dark render we started with, and then we end with kind of a nice, bright, poppy render. And honestly, that looks pretty good. So I think that's for the most part good. There's so many other tabs you can mess with, like the color grading. I have other classes where I'm doing more stylized work, and so I'd be using these tabs a little bit more. But you know, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If it's already looking pretty decent, maybe I'll add a little bit of grain here, like a tiny bit, and then that should be good. And then to just save a preset, click this guy right here, save it. Let's go call this ring pop tutorial 1, and then you can always pick from the presets, save, boom, there's our render. And that's pretty much it. So guys, I appreciate you checking out this class, especially you guys who are subscribed on IG. I think that was promised for this class. And then we'll be back with the next one pretty soon. I'm trying to get on this a little bit more as we keep going. I've been learning a lot in ZBrush, been learning a lot in Nomad or the iPad. So once I get this stuff kind of ready, I'll be releasing these things hopefully much more frequently. And if you did like it, let me know. Comment on my posts on IG when I do post about this stuff, and then future classes you would want to see. So appreciate it, guys, and we'll see you guys in the next class.